scale of good deeds. We have our very own Dr. Ayaz from our community. He's an ER doctor, and also Dr. Nabeel Rana from Charlotte, who had the opportunity and came and blessed us with his presence here. So I'm not going to take much of your time. I'm going to want to give it to them. Bi-idhnillah. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala once again to bless this gathering. Jazakallah khair.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So firstly, I want to thank everyone for, number one, being here. I think part of the mission is going there and doing the medical work, but I think the bigger part of the mission is coming back and bearing witness to what we have, what we've seen. And then probably equally important is answering questions and then talking about what it is that we can do. Neither of us are, I speak for myself, are public speakers. So this is not what we trained to do or in a lot of ways wanted to do, but this has now become an obligation on us to share the stories that we have. So, you know, for me, it's a great honor to be sitting next to Dr. Nabeel Rana, and as mentioned, came from Charlotte. He is a vascular surgeon. So for those that don't know, that is a surgeon of the blood vessels, and essentially this is probably one of the highest needed specialties, and feel free to correct me, in situations of blast injuries and things like that. So, you know, I think inshallah we'll have a chance to hear what he has to say about that. You know, in terms of the format, we have a short presentation, but really are not going to stick to that. So, and certainly want to get to the questions as well. So, for me, I'm going to take advantage of having Dr. Rana beside me, and I may start with asking some questions of him. And certainly, if people have questions, feel free to raise your hand and ask the question. So, you know, I think what I hear from a lot of different people is why they decided to go, what drove them. And so that will be my first question to Dr. Rana here. If you want to tell us what it is that drove you in your heart to go, what you felt, and then maybe the process of making that decision and actually getting there, inshallah.
Assalamu Alaykum wa rahmatullah. First, I want to thank also everybody here for coming, and for the IAR for inviting me, for Dr. Ayaz for having me sit by his side here. This is, for me, it's a very, very difficult thing to talk about, and I'm sure for Ayaz as well, for anyone who's been there, but it becomes clear that it's part of the obligation of having the privilege to go there, to come back and be the voice of people who have no voice. We pray that we can do that justice, and that's mostly what I fear, is that we don't fail in that. Real quick, if I can steal just a minute from the program. Sorry, my voice, okay. If you can't hear me, just start waving at me. My voice is at a level where it becomes like a mumble, and so I apologize for that. It's very heartwarming to see the community here and to know Ayaz grew up here, and you must feel very, very warm and proud and happy to hear from him, someone to go do such an honorable thing, coming from this place where the community raised him, I'm sure, and he had played a very important role in his life. So to hear that, I'm sure, is very, very special. I wanted to steal 1 minute from my own community. There's a gentleman who was like my taya, like a brother to my father, who I knew my whole life. And just on the way here, I heard he passed. So if you can remember, in your dua, Mia Shah, he was a gem of a soul, and he left his wife, Rahila, behind, and his children, Hamza, Faroza, Noura, and Mashal, if you can remember them in your du'as after this. We all know what's happening because we were following the news. Everyone was, following whatever information we could find. For me personally, I was hit like everybody else. I mean, it was devastating. You feel helpless. What can you do? You pray and you do dua, which is the most important thing, and that still remains the most important thing, which I think we underestimate and we kind of brush aside that, yeah, do dua, but what can you really do? So number one, that's still the most important thing we can do. And for me, I just happened to be in a field and in a subspecialty that allowed me to go. And honestly, in the beginning, when people were reaching out for help and aid and asking for volunteers, I very casually gave my information, and I didn't think twice about actually going other than to volunteer, because I felt that was my duty. If I can provide help somewhere, then whether that's here, there, anywhere else in the world, that's the way I was raised, is that you can never say no to someone who's asking for help. And so when it became apparent that my specific specialty was needed, and the reason I say this is because I wanted to be known that I'm not anything special as a person, or elevated in any way personally as an individual. It was just through whatever blessings I had been given in my training and my life that just happened to work out to a point that this was an intersection in my life that it worked out. And I wasn't trying to go. Many people have been trying to go for months and months and months and months and weren't able to go. And I hate to say it this way, but I didn't try that hard other than to just volunteer. And it worked out in a way that I realized you have to be open to what your role is in this world. And sometimes that opens up, sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's easy. But when that role opens up, then you have to accept it, no matter how difficult it is. And this opened up for me, and honestly, I can say that it was a privilege. I don't like the idea that we make out that we're heroes when we go there and save lives and come back and tell stories and people praise you. Honestly, it was a privilege, and I often say to the people that I was there with that I fear I benefited more from them than they did from me on my trip there, and so alhamdulillah for that, I'm blessed. But this is a roundabout answer to this question, I'm sorry. So this is, alhamdulillah, it honestly just worked out. I was fortunate to go.
Jazakallah khair for that. It's how that story ends is very similar to me, is that it's definitely considered a blessing. Still keep in touch with some of the doctors there on a regular basis, even today, this morning type of thing. And I consider that I did take more from them than I did give. The other end of that story is, for me, it was a struggle going for, again, there are a lot of people in this room that influence me, from my close friends that are here to aunties and coaches, things like that. But when I had made the decision to go, it started to weigh very heavy on me. I actually became a little bit saddened, maybe depressed even was the word, when the Rafah border closed and my mission was canceled. But alhamdulillah, was able to make it there. So, I'll use the rest of, or some of the slide deck to spark some more conversation, and again, maybe some questions. All of the pictures that I use in my presentations are pictures that I've taken personally. This one is taken from the balcony of where the visiting doctors stay. So there's a dorm area, there's a balcony, and this is a picture from there. Specifically, what you can see on this left side, that mound of dirt, is where outside Nasser Hospital, where they found the mass graves. So it was always a reminder, even when you got back to the dorm area to try and get some rest, where you are and what you were dealing with. So some of the things I thought may be helpful to talk about are these things, and entry and travel, I thought was something that was challenging and unique for everyone's experience, and hearing Dr. Rana's side would be something I'd like to do. The destruction strikes everyone. I think as soon as you enter Gaza, you would say the same thing that I would, which is just the destruction is way beyond anything that you can see in a video. The medical care, we'll talk a little bit about that. The reality is that that isn't really the main part of what we a lot of times have to talk about. The people and their living situation, again, seeing it in person is something. Hopefully we can share some of that, and then hopefully take questions. This picture that you see at the bottom is in Gaza City. As we're driving by, I saw this graffiti on there and thought it was probably worthy of taking a picture of. So I'll start again with sort of fireside chat and ask the question about your entry and travel. I've heard a lot of challenges, and I don't know the answer to these questions. We spent a little bit of time talking, but I know everyone has some stories about this and the difficulty and the challenges they face getting in, so I'd be interested to hear what you have to share.
Yeah, this is more, I guess, just understanding what the state is there that a lot of people don't realize. When Rafah was open, there were a lot of people going in and out from the Egyptian border, and that border was controlled by Egypt and Gaza, so there was a lot of ability to take supplies, money, medications, things like that in with every person that went in. When Rafah was invaded and the border was closed and destroyed in May, things changed dramatically, not just in the face of the war, but also in the aid going in. So as most people probably know, the entry became rerouted to go into Amman, cross the West Bank, across the Israeli border in the West Bank, or Israeli-controlled border, and then actually transporting down through Israel into the internal border of Gaza and entering from there. The issue was not so much the travel, which was more challenging, but there was, along with that, was a tremendous restriction on the number of people that could actually go in. And there's been a very concerted effort to limit the amount of outside attention or presence within. And this was a big, big blow in that, whereas before I think maybe there'd be 8, 10 people in each organization crossing from Rafah. Now the negotiation was that there would only be maybe 20 people total for the entire world coming in. And so those seats had to be divided with different organizations, Doctors Without Borders, Med Global, whatever the organizations were. So there might only be 2 people from any given organization if they're lucky to get a seat. And out of those 20 people, maybe only half were actually medical aid, and the other half were even UN personnel staff. They were all included in these restrictions. So very, very, very few people or physicians or medical help were able to enter after May. And it's been like that since. It's been extremely restricted. Along with each restricted person, the restrictions on what you can take in is so severe that convoys have been canceled or turned back because someone had too much medication. And so the rule is that you can only take enough supplies just for yourself, personal supplies. And so you can imagine for 1 month stay or 3 weeks, I think Ayaz was there for 3 weeks as well, that's not a short period of time for needing medications, food, especially when you don't have anything available there. And nothing extra. So the point is you can't take any extra medications for the people there. You can't take any extra supplies, equipment, clothes, anything at all. And again, this is part of how you dehumanize a population that we already know aid was restricted coming in, just general aid. And now the people that used to be able to at least bring things with themselves was very restricted now to almost nothing as well. So I think that's the biggest challenge that people should realize is that as aid is going in, it's not much relief happening. It's just a handful of people who are there at any given time from around the world. And again, this points to how fortunate Ayaz and I feel to have been able to go, because it's virtually impossible at this point. But also, you just can't take much in. So it's whatever paths of aid that there used to be, they're being restricted one by one by one, I think.
Yeah, so obviously very similar experience. We're going through the same border. You know, the term open air prison is something that you hear, and just as going in, getting out is kind of the same challenge. It doesn't matter what kind of medical problems you have or what care could be given elsewhere. You are where you are. Even when you talk about north and south separation when I was there. One of the only functional NICUs in the entire strip was in the north, but if you happen to be in the south, you had no access to it. So certainly you would see higher deaths of newborns and things like that because of that lack of specialty coverage. I have a story that I've told certainly some friends, and it involves our vascular surgeon that went with us. He had his bag opened, he had his socks kind of undone, everything was searched. They found the food that he brought, which included some cans of tuna. So the border security folks opened those cans of tuna, stuck their finger in there, swirled it around, and said, okay, this is clear, right? Obviously with the intent to ruin the food that he was bringing in. And it wasn't as if he brought so much that he was going to be giving it away. It was probably adequate for his intended stay of 2 weeks. And then after they let him take whatever else was left, they told him that when you go in there and you see Sinwar, you see the head of the Hamas political party, you let him know that we will find him, we will cut him up, and all of your surgeons will not put him back together. And his response is what you would expect, right? Which is, I'm a doctor here to help people, right? I'm not here to meet Hamas. I'm not here for this stuff that you're saying to me. But this is somebody talking to not only a physician, who typically you would think would get some level of respect, but someone that holds an American passport, and that's the level of respect that he got. So you can only imagine what is the level of respect they were showing anybody else. And we're not talking about just since October 7th, well before that. So let's see. All right. These pictures are primarily right at the border. I forgot to mention this. So this is on the Israeli side, the one on the bottom where you see all of these tanks, certainly paid for by the United States. And then you see some Israeli soldiers who had no problems pointing guns at us. That's just kind of part and parcel of what happens. Next, we really want to talk about some of the destruction. So I mentioned this as something that we see. So Dr. Rana, do you have maybe some things that you think about when you think about the amount of destruction that you saw, or any points that come from that?
Yeah, it's overwhelming to see it, and again, I always say that there's no pictures or videos that can really capture what's happening there, because we see a destroyed building, we see a destroyed town, we see rubble everywhere, but if you can expand that on a magnitude of an entire city, absolutely leveled, it's not a neighborhood, it's an entire city, and driving for miles and miles, and this is all you see. It's astounding, and it's hard to capture that. So, one of the issues is when we talk about, targeted strikes and this and this and this, that's not, we all know that's not what's happening. This is, targeted section by section by section by section until everything is wiped out. What was more noteworthy to me when I entered, because as you enter, this is what you enter into immediately, because you're entering from the south and you're Rafah and the east side of Khan Yunis, you're seeing this immediately. The other part noteworthy is that despite all this destruction, there are still people living here and walking through the streets and walking around as if it's just a regular day. And obviously it's not in their life. But this is how they don't have any other choice. So they just survive. And as we were entering in our UN convoy, many kids, adults are coming, running to the convoy to wave. And you're looking around and there's rubble like this. And they found a couch, so they just put it outside, and they're sitting and just trying to enjoy their day of not knowing what's going to happen that day. And so nobody is, inside crying and feeling sorry for themselves. They're still trying to go on each and every day. And this, as we talk about people, I'm sure this will come up more in detail. But it's such a stark contrast in what you see and how the people are still trying to just live there. You'll see buildings that if there's 2 walls up, they'll use tarp tents, something to still stay there because there's nowhere else to go, and actually living in a lot of these destroyed buildings. But this points again more to the people than to the destruction.
Of the pictures here, the one I think is kind of noteworthy is that one on the top right. This is in one of the hospitals in the north, Indonesia hospital, and this is something that similarly we saw at Nasser Hospital as well. I assume probably where you were, where the drones, when they besiege these hospitals, basically surround the area and any place their windows and essentially just fire in. These are obviously armed drones, and so you're seeing basically bullet holes in the interior wall of this hospital. Obviously, the bottom right, you see the mosque there, and that's essentially what every masjid looks like there. You know, just to highlight some of this destruction, and I'll tell you, I'm not sure how you were with pictures or videos, but as soon as I got in, I started taking pictures, and I found myself taking more and more pictures of destruction because I think it had to get better. I tell people specifically in the north, if you asked me to find an area that I could take a picture and not show destruction, I could not find it. I mean, there was always some kind of damage to buildings. Most of the time it looked like a lot of what we've seen here. That top right you're seeing, not totally right, but third from the right, actually top middle, seeing that masjid again. What I like to show is what it looked like before, and this is what one of the students there shared with me, because this is probably more striking, and you may have seen something like this, but you know, you're seeing that masjid that was destroyed in that top kind of middle picture as well, and it's just unbelievable to me as you drive through some of these roads and see all these cars. I mean, just in one of these pictures, the amount of cars that you see are far more than anything that we saw in any of our travel. I don't know if you want to add anything to that. No? The medical care. So, you know, we were in different hospitals, so I'm interested to hear what Dr. Rana has to say about the medical care. I know I've heard the stories of what happens in the operating room. I was in the emergency department, but you know, a lot of our experiences are probably very similar when you talk about the equipment that we had, or more appropriately did not have, the amount of patients that we had to take care of that was well beyond what was certainly safe or really even possible.
I think this is probably what people see the most, is the pictures of kids who are injured, innocent people who are killed, maimed. And any single one of these pictures that Ayaz was around or saw is enough should devastate any human being. What's difficult to explain is the scale of this, that when we get a headline here on Al Jazeera, probably nowhere else, it goes viral and it's so crushing, but then to really understand that the scale of that is that that's one event that happens every single day or multiple times a day, and so there's no way really to convey the magnitude of what's happening here. I think besides the medical care, because you know, everyone sees pictures, has heard stories of these horrible things, and I can tell you 10 more stories that will make you cry, probably make me cry thinking about it, from the ER to the OR, what you see, what you operate on, what you maybe can help, what you can help. But even beyond that, the need there is much, much, much further than just, you know, the trauma, the bombs and things like that. You have to remember that 90% of the people are displaced and living in tents, and these tents are congregated into very, very concentrated areas. And I was at Shuhada Al-Aqsa Hospital in Dir al-Bala in the middle section, and that was one of the so-called safe zones where immediately around the hospital it was okay. I mean, there were some places destroyed, but it was mostly tent camps there. And when you have massive, massive populations of people in these tent camps, and again, there's no hygiene, there's no water supply, all the infectious diseases you can think of, but also just general medical care becomes a huge, huge burden on those facilities that's there. So Al-Aqsa Hospital is a very small hospital. I always say, you always see the pictures on the news of the ER and you think of some big center. It's only a 200-bed hospital, which would be like a very, very small community hospital here. And it's functioning as a level 1 trauma center and serving a few 100,000 people with just general medical care. But it's very simple, easily treated things like diabetes, hypertension, things like that aren't treated, and they succumb to terrible, terrible complications. And so we know that the mortality, the actual number of people who have been killed is far, far, far greater than any number that's shown. Besides this, not to, again, instead of talking about the horrible things that you see or treat, the one thing I was very, very humbled by when I arrived is, this is the first time I've been to Gaza, and my impression was that you have a specific specialty and need, and you're going to go there and you're going to provide a service that's not available, and you're going to help people and really contribute to the medical care there. And I've learned very quickly when I arrived, I can almost guarantee Ayaz probably had the same impression, is that that's actually not, that's not why we're there. We're there to help and do all the things that we were trained to do. But one thing that is very, very sorely missing from the stories here is how incredibly capable and well-trained and dedicated the local medical staff is there. And I was shocked when I came there because I thought I'm coming to somewhere where there's nobody there and there's nothing supplies and I'm going to be doing everything myself. And it was very, very impressive how much they were doing and how much they had been doing on their own for 9-10 months. And a lot of us foreign, volunteers were coming and going, and especially in the beginning, it was just a week. You go for a week, you come back. And getting to spend a longer time there, not only did you learn some things from them and how to function with zero resources, I could talk technical things from a surgical standpoint, like how they've made use of some instrument for some other purpose and this and that. But they're very, very, very capable people, alhamdulillah. Like that really needs to be said. Because when we talk about heroes, these are the heroes because these are people who themselves are coming to work every day to help their own people. And when you sit and talk with them, which we had, when you're there long enough, when you're sleeping in the hospital together, you're living together, and you're spending 24 hours a day together, then you become connected to these people in a way that is much deeper than you can ever imagine. And that's what the privilege is, because by the time you leave, it's like your brothers and sisters, it's your family. And when you are talking to these people as family, it's different than when you're talking as a visitor. When you first show up, it's, the first thing they do is, what can we get you? Are you comfortable? Do you need can we get you another blanket? Can we get you this or that? And it takes a while to break down that host mentality, which is so strong in the Arab culture anyway, but especially within Palestinians, that it takes a while to convince them that, listen, we're here to help you, you don't have to host us. And once you break through that formality and you actually sit down with them, then they will start to talk to you about their life. And not just complaining about what's happening now, but what their life was before. And it's a way for them to share that this is not normal for us. And for people here, you look there, you say, Gaza is a place, oh, it's probably tents, it's probably rubble anyway, they're used to it, this and that. And they show you, sit down with your phone and show you pictures of, this is what my house was, this is the bed I used to have, this is the pool where we used to go swimming, this is the garden I used to have fruit in. And they would show these pictures fondly with a smile on their face because they wanted to share with you, this is what we were, not this. And that was very humbling and it was a privilege. And in some ways, you realize that when they tell you what they've lost and what they've suffered, it's one of the roles and obligations I learned is that you try to absorb as much of that pain as you can because they will never complain to each other. I mean, how can you? How can you go to your friend and say, I lost this, and your friend says, well, I lost that and that. And none of them are in the mentality of complaining, but they will share. They will share, and they will only share so that you can go back and tell people what's happening here, and not even for help. They don't ask for help. They don't ask for anything at all other than they just don't want to be forgotten. They say, just tell people what's happening. That's it. That's absolutely it. And so again, I keep getting back to the people, but from a medical care standpoint, honestly, that was very eye-opening for me, and I realized that it wasn't so much my specialty that was needed, but just the simple act of being present physically and telling them that I'm here to help. And I have your back. And you're not alone. And I think that made a bigger difference to them than any number of surgeries I may have performed. And it took a while for them to really open up to allow that. Otherwise, you know, unfortunately, they have a host mentality when you go there, and it takes a bit to break through that.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I think that the reality is that they can't rely on us coming in, right? I mean, the numbers have been cut, and the reality is that when they have a patient with whatever traumatic problem it may be at that time, if you have a vascular surgeon or not, it doesn't matter. Somebody's doing the surgery. I mean, I've seen many a times somebody who is not trained in cardiothoracic surgery go into the chest of somebody and save their life because they had to do it before. They will likely have to do it again, and they can't rely on England or the US or Egypt or anybody getting a surgeon in with that specific specialty to do it. You know, there are a couple of stories I remember specifically from the north where the supplies are less. We had a French general surgeon that came with us. He spent most of his time in the operating room, but came down to the ER when we had some blast injuries, and saw this little girl and told me, hey, she's having a lot of pain. I don't think she needs to go to the operating room. Just give her some morphine to calm her down. And I had to tell him, we don't have morphine. I mean, I don't know what you have in the operating room, but we definitely don't have that down here. We had nothing that would be kind of appropriate to help this little girl. And then to speak to the expertise, I remember it must have been 2 a.m., came down for an injured baby that was probably about 2 or 3 months old. And one of the other ER doctors was already down there visiting ER doctors, and so was one of the Gazan doctors who I'd worked with many times, but young. All of these doctors are very young, right? Because the older ones maybe have been detained, so put in jail, maybe they've been killed, some of them have fled, but essentially everybody was tag you're it, right? So if you were at the end of your medical school training, you move up to your residency. If you're close to the end of your residency, here's your medical license, you're practicing. So these guys are young, and he said, I'm going to put in a chest tube to relieve a collapsed lung in this baby. And the ER doctor, again, that was not from Gaza, he said, let's wait and get the x-ray. And I saw him look up at him, and he said, he will die. To somebody twice his age with twice his experience at least, and he was absolutely right. I mean, it was the right decision at that time. And you know, I felt proud of the fact that he did what was the right thing, despite probably the gap in experience and pressure to kind of succumb to what he was being told was the right thing to do. So, the people and living situation. I know you've already talked about this. You know, I'll go ahead and point out a couple of things or maybe just one thing here that I like about this picture. The one in the top right is one of the first pictures I took going in, and I intended to take a picture of this, what is essentially a market. If you were to zoom in, you would see that he's selling some supplies that he has to the people. But later on, when I was showing this picture to somebody, I inadvertently realized that I caught standing on that roof a few children, and these children are flying a kite. And I had no idea I had that in the picture, but that is really a little bit of what Dr. Rana describes, that you know, the children are children. They, you know, we have, you know, more pictures than I can count of children in situations that I can't even show in a group like this. But this is the stuff that, you know, reminds me of the strength that they have, and the fact that they go on, right?
Yeah, this one, you know, when I came here, I thought, what should I talk about? Because we know the stories and we hear the same things again, and it comes back to, you know, you're just crushed and hurt and depressed. And I thought this may be the more important thing to talk about is the people. And how many people here are of Palestinian descent? And from Gaza? West Bank? Al-Quds. Oh, subhanAllah. West Bank, subhanAllah. So let me praise you without, you were not supposed to praise to your face, but I'll say that one of the most eye-opening things for me going there was, among other things, was the actual people of Gaza. And I want to say this very clearly that this isn't out of sympathy that I'm speaking like this. Again, alhamdulillah for being able to spend a significant amount of time with them, 3 weeks, which felt honestly like 3 months, and really getting to know these people. I have never met any people in my life, anywhere in the world, anywhere that I've been, including among Muslims, like the people of Gaza, in many, many ways, but primarily I'm talking about from deen. Okay, and I'm talking to you all different than I would talk to somebody else, because the most important lesson, I think, one of the most important lessons that we can learn, that maybe we can impart, that you don't see in the pictures and videos, is the people themselves. We know they're suffering, but how are they dealing with the suffering? And when we sit back and think, and Ayaz, cut me off, because I don't want to just keep talking about this and run out of time, but when we think about what can we do, we feel helpless here. And what can we do to make this stop? What can we do to help these people? Number one, remember, these people, first of all, are elevated. I think they're well beyond us. And the people who have been killed and who have been passed and martyred, they're beyond us. And they're in a better place than we are. There's nothing that we should even cry about for them. It's the people who are still alive and suffering through the current situation that we should hurt for and cry for and feel pain for. But even then, I will tell you that I admire them because their status is far beyond where mine is. In their deen. And it's very, very difficult to show you, because over here, you know, we look at them and we very easily say, oh, they're a resilient people. And they are a resilient people. But when we say that, we almost undermine the difficulty of being resilient in that situation. That's in their nature, and as if it makes it easier. It's to say someone's patient, so, oh, that person is patient. So they go through a difficulty, and they don't have this terrible reaction, and we say, oh, well, they have sabr. You don't just have sabr, right? You have to practice it. You actually have to show it. You actually have to do it. And so I hesitate to say these are resilient people, because it almost just qualifies it and says, well, they can handle it. And that's not true. They can handle it because they have no other choice, but they do have a choice on how they react. And we see in many places in the world, primarily here, when you go through a difficulty, how do we react? Obviously, I mean, this is a cliche, but we know how do we react to a hardship and what we call a hardship. So when we know what their hardship is, or we think, we have a glimpse of it, it's not just what they're going through, but how they are reacting to it. And I can tell you, it may be because they're used to not having help from outside. They're used to have learned that you can only rely on Allah, and they truly, truly believe this. We say this, but do we truly believe it? Which is why when we come in, they don't even ask us for help, and it's why they don't feel like, oh, the saviors have come, and why they just act like hosts. Because I imagine, I'm not speaking for them, but I imagine in their mind, we have the help we need, but these people came to help, let us allow them the opportunity to gain their own ajr, to be here. I honestly believe that. And the most common words I hear there, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. That's all you hear from anybody. If you sit them down and say, tell me about your life, tell me what has happened to you. They say, oh yes, this and this and this, and the stories would crush you, you're in shock. And at the end they say, smile and say, but Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And we can tell this like a story, but really try to absorb and understand that and what that means. And so what can we do? What we can do is learn from them, number one. Learn from them. And so in feeling like we're honoring them or doing something from them, number one, let us change ourselves. Let us look inwards, okay? that when we are enjoying comforts and luxuries and safety and security and everything here, we go through a difficulty, at the minimum, remember them and say, okay, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And understand that any difficulty we go through is really laughable compared to what we could be going through. And this is cliche, this is human nature. We all struggle with this, we all know this. But the greatest lesson is that. And if it doesn't mean, okay, you don't go out to dinner and enjoy yourself, don't sit here and have coffee to drink and enjoy yourself. It doesn't mean that. It means when you do that, have full appreciation and gratitude for that and don't take it for granted. Because the simplest thing I can tell you when we were over there, I could just think, imagine just sitting on my back porch and looking at my trees and how great that would have been. And now when I come back, I sit there and I just think there, like, that simple blessing is so huge that every single thing in our life should be like that we take for granted. That every small blessing should really overwhelm us with gratitude. And so nothing here should be able to overwhelm us with being angry, being upset, cursing, this and that. When someone tells me I lost 200 people in my family, 200 people. My house was destroyed. I'm living with my family in a tent for 9 months and still smile and say, but Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And if that is not humbling to someone coming from this country to there, then we have much more work to do on ourselves. But this is the biggest lesson of the people I can tell. They are beautiful, beautiful people that we don't realize. We pity them and envy them, or we pity them, I envy them, that I wish we can actually attain that status that they have. We never wish for hardship, we never wish for suffering on ourselves or on anybody. But if we were, I can only hope that I could handle this test the way that they have handled it. And it has been 9 months, 10 months, and even to this day, it is a lesson in sabr and gratitude to go there. And that's what I say was the privilege. I could talk hours and hours about the people that if you want to do something for them, really do it out of love. I worry and fear that a lot of our advocacy and a lot of our efforts are out of hate for the occupiers rather than out of love for our brothers and sisters, and these are people who should be loved. And that should be what directs all of our efforts.
Jazakallah khair for that. I have nothing to add for that. I know we're running out of time. Just two other quick things I'll point in this picture is the children and even the one with the wheelchair in the middle is carrying the water. Like 98% of the water UNICEF has determined that is there for drinking is not safe. And then that doctor I mentioned is actually, I didn't realize he was in this picture too, but the bottom right in the white in the back. Imad is his name. Yeah. If there are any questions, I know we don't have much time, but we're happy, inshallah, to try and answer.
I was supposed to be the side show here, and I was supposed to be the main talk, and I have a tendency to speak too much. It's a bad habit. I think number one, giving, obviously supplies are very restricted, but donating to organizations that are able to help, I think is critical. When these organizations, I think they're stockpiling supplies, if and when they are able to get things in, it's crucial. Every single thing is needed, so every single thing helps. That's over there. Over here, I think supporting the organizations that are making an effort in the political arena, in the public opinion arena, places like CARE and things like that, I think it's very, very important to continue to help those organizations because they were doing the work that we maybe should be doing but aren't able to. But the people that are able to do it, I think we should support. And the last thing I'll say is that when we help, let us not fall into this ease of thinking that, I go on social media and I read these articles every day and I share them with my family and that is your effort. Let's not get comfortable in thinking that that's your effort. If you're not uncomfortable to some degree, then interrogate yourself and say, am I really doing enough? Am I doing enough? And it doesn't mean that you have to go to Gaza. It doesn't mean that you have to speak at work or things like that. But the more important thing is, if you're not, let it not be out of fear. Remember, remember who are we really serving? Let us not be worried about our employers, about our neighbors, what people are going to say, what people are going to think socially, and this and that. That if you're not doing it, do it because you don't think that's the right thing, or this and that. But really constantly interrogate yourself. What can I do more? On social media, my kids made me start an Instagram account. They're showing me how to use it, and this and this and this, and a lot of people following this and that. And I told them, I was like, there's no point for me to have this account unless you tell your friends and their families and our neighbors, because we have to get out of this echo chamber. And so if each of you goes and talks to one of your American neighbors who might not know what's happening, it might be uncomfortable, but that's the point. If you talk to somebody at work that may not know, that's the point. I think that's what everyone's obligation is at this point, if you want to do something. And I would also advise, don't get into arguments with the other extreme, because that's futile. That becomes a battle of nafs, right? And so don't engage in that. That's a waste of time. But there's a large middle portion, I think, that can benefit from all of you.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think I'm a big believer in the ground game, and each of you have a sphere of influence that is outside just the regular Muslim world, and you may be influential in the profession that you do, that they respect you, or how you act as a neighbor, they may respect you, and utilizing that type of currency, that respect that you've garnered to now speak about this issue. And if you are somebody that they say, well, I know this person to be a great neighbor, I know this person to be, a great lawyer, or, whatever else they're doing, engineer, professional, whatever it is, I think using the currency you've built up to spend it on this is probably the best value that we can have for it. I'll let Dr. Rana answer this. I'm not sure if this is a setup question because you prepared me to go, so I'm not sure what you're asking this question for to me. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I think that when we talk about what we can do, that should be added to it, right? What are you supporting here in terms of the youth? Because that is what will not only help change the trajectory of what's going on there, but maybe everywhere. And for me, it's hard to pinpoint, right? Again, I see friends like Hassan and Ahmed, and then of course my mentors in this room. And these are the little pieces that brought me to that, right? And so, all of that weighs on me. I told a couple of my friends that were ER doctors who were not in the right situation to be able to go. I said, I will carry your obligation with me, and I will work to clear the waiting room of the ER for when you're able to go, whether that's a week, a month, a year. And so I think it's built by the community, right? So how to do that, again, I think you have some expertise on that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we should be asking you, actually. I mean, the community where you're raised and our parents, or anybody, because in the end, it's just, I think most of us are raised as Muslims to think greater than ourselves, right? And to think of the world and the ummah, and to think of our accountability at the end of all of this. And not just focus on what we achieved here, but what we will say that what we did, right? And the only caveat I would make is that, going on overseas missions is maybe that's a goal, but also that we become a very outcome-oriented society, and sometimes that even drives our actions. And so we can't make our actions based on, we think there's gonna be an outcome from that, right? Which is not in our control, we know that. Our only job is to do what's right. And unfortunately, we, a lot of times, limit ourselves in our actions based on what we decide is futility. And who are we to decide that our actions are worthy or not worthy, or that they will have an outcome or not an outcome? Because then all of a sudden we're the ones who are saying that we're deciding if something's effective or not, right? And so one of the biggest things I think with my kids and with all the kids we should encourage is that do what's right, no matter how big or small it is, because that's what you're accountable for. You're not responsible for the action, and especially in the current climate of politics and things like that, what can we do to make change? What can we do to make change? Yes, do all those things, but don't limit yourself from things that you don't think are gonna matter. Because your only job is to say that, yes, I tried, I did that. I spoke to this person, even though I knew it wasn't gonna change their mind, I spoke to them. That matters, right? You help somebody, that matters. Going to Gaza, many people will tell you it's futile for Ayaz to go to Gaza. What can he possibly accomplish there? Many people will say this, unfortunately, and that's the mentality I'm talking about, that his right or obligation was to do what he could do. And beyond that, it's not in his power to determine whether he was useful or not, but he can stand, inshallah, in front of Allah and say, I'm accountable for what I did. And I think this is what we need to continue to emphasize in the community, as a brother.
So the question, just to repeat it, is, did you feel or fear that the IDF, IOF are going to come because they know that you're there, that you're doing good work, those types of things? And I'll tell you, I felt a little bit of the opposite, that we were a protective factor, that, as disrespectfully as they treated us, they pointed guns at us, and I could tell you that I wonder if we didn't have an American passport, if they would have just shot, right? And we would have not even been a headline. I can't tell you how many mass casualty incidences where I saw, half a dozen to a dozen people that died in that event that didn't make it to the news in any way. So that's what it would have been. I think they probably did not want to have to answer for that for an American. And I will tell you that we did fear that. I have a picture of that up here. This is a text that we got at 3 a.m. saying to evacuate, and we are in the red area. The Indonesia hospital was in the red area, and we were expected to evacuate the hospital. Ultimately, the Red Crescent got us labeled a safe zone, so they did not carry out operations in our hospital at that time. But the hospital was preparing to try to evacuate the patients, and who knows what they were going to do. We've seen from the first picture I showed you with the mass graves, Shifa Hospital, all these places. More recently, even where you were at, they evacuated it and besieged it is probably the right term. So that is always a thought in the back of our mind. We're always hearing bombs. We're always hearing drones. We're always feeling the bombs close enough to shake the building even. It's just what you see there.
Yeah, look, to your point, 90% of the hospitals, well, they've been destroyed, right? And the doctors have been, nurses have been detained. And many of the people at Al-Aqsa Hospital where I was were from Shifa Hospital, who after Shifa was destroyed, that they came down here. And so to hear their stories was very, very daunting. And so in their minds, they always feel like hospitals are targets. These aren't safe zones anymore. And as we know, they have very little regard for anything safe zone, you know, hospitals, the UN vehicles, you know, anything like that. And so from their standpoint, absolutely. And yet they still continue to come to the hospital. So this is the point I wanted. I met people who were detained and beaten from Shifa Hospital, who are now at Al-Aqsa Hospital, still working every single day. And you can imagine the mentality that the same thing can just happen again, and yet they still continue to come. They still continue to come to work every single day. But to Ayaz's point, it was almost like an inside joke there. We talked with the residents and the surgeons. They say, you know what your real value is here, is that as long as you're here, we're safe. And it was a sad but true realization that as long as there's American doctors, the hospital is safe. And we provided like a buffer zone. And then us American doctors who are of Desi or Arab descent would joke that when the white European doctors come, they're our buffer zone. So there's like two levels. But that's really what the reality there, unfortunately. We do provide almost like a safety to a point. Again, now we've seen that there's even disregard for an American passport, unfortunately. With Aisha Noor, who was killed in the West Bank. More than the reported number? 100%. 100%. There's nobody that will go there will say that it's even close to that. I think Ayaz will agree. I think there was an article that's estimating the total deaths, including medical related to everything related to the conflict, to 180,000, which even that I think is very underestimated.
And when he says 100% agreement, it's actually 500% is probably a safer number, and even that, what you have to realize is that the numbers are not counted properly. And then the other efforts for genocide, if you don't have the right medicines to treat a heart attack or a stroke, you don't have the right equipment, you don't have any of this type of stuff, these people are going to die, and they wouldn't have died if supplies were allowed in. People that die of malnourishment, people who die of diseases because they're living in tents, those types of things. The number is astronomical compared to what it is.
Jazakumullah khairan for Dr. Ayaz and Dr. Nabeel. I'm sure that we all benefited tremendously. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give strength to the ummah and reward them for their tremendous efforts. And Jazakumullah khairan for everyone for coming. And inshallah we look to benefit further in the future as well. Assalamu Alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا